This is episode 46 of our Road to Unicum, and today we review the AMX 30, a tier 9 French medium tank. I've had a bit of a cough for a couple months, so I've been unable to record narration, so hopefully this will come out pretty clean, but you'll have to bear with me. We're going to take a look at two tier 10 battles, and in both cases my team is going to deploy very poorly, so I want to talk about how to manage poor deployments. One common piece of advice you'll hear is that you should go with the lemming train. I tend to disagree with that for a couple reasons. One, if you go with the lemming train, even if you push, it's not a guarantee that other players will in fact push up and support you. And then the other thing is that you can get into a traffic jam. Generally speaking, if you're all together, you have the same field of fire, so it can really limit you. Now in this case, the most common place to go is the northwest corner of the map, whether you're a heavy tank or a medium tank that has either a good turret or gun depression. And in this case, I'm watching the map and I can see that our tanks are deploying really poorly. We've got too many tank destroyers all cluttered up together. It looks like about 5 or 6 of them in the same general area. And then we've got a platoon of medium tanks that is kind of hanging out in the eastern side of the map. The main problem is if you have a bunch of people all cluttered together like that, it generally means that if one of them can't see anything, none of them can see anything, right? That's why there's so much value in having 1 or 2 tanks go out in front to spot, and then that will allow the tanks behind them to fire. But I'm clicking on the map here, and I've been dropping some not so subtle hints that we need to spread out our deployment. The only thing we've got heading to this northwest corner beyond the AMX 1390 are 2 tier 8 heavies and a tier 8 medium, but against tier 10s that's not really going to hang out. Now I've been waiting because the AMX 30 is a very fast tank and aiming across the shelf where that T-54 appeared. So because you've got a fast tank in the AMX 30, you can get the first shot advantage. It's really important. The other shots that I will have will be if their heavies try to cross the one lane. There's a gap there where I can hit them. Now I'm going to have to keep a careful eye on how many tanks they've got here because, if they start to push in numbers, I'm going to have to back off and run away bravely. But, the idea is I don't want to just concede sections of the map without at least spotting and working some damage into them. Now, I wouldn't do what this British heavy tank is doing. He's overexposing himself up on this ridge, and that first shot against the E5 misses, and the AMX 30, it has a lot of really good qualities. The biggest downside of it is relatively poor gun handling and accuracy. And one nice thing is by being out here and helping to spot for our Artie, our Artie hit a tracking shot on the OHO, which allowed me to put a shot into the rear part of his tank, and then I work in one more shot on that E5 since he's trying to drive around some of his friendlies. And then there's one shell bounced by the turret of the 30. Now the AMX 30 used to have a relatively soft turret, but it was buffed in recent patches, and I think this was a very good change. This now allows the tank to be played more as a brawling medium, hull down, whereas previously the gun had better accuracy and was played generally as a redline sniper. Okay, so I'm starting to bail now because we're not really having a lot of support. The thing is, I don't necessarily want to run away too far, but I can't stay there against that E5 platoon. The frontally, the only place I'm going to be able to pen them is in their lower front glacis. But if they're on the move, that's not an easy shot. Now this is a good place to stop where I am right here. This is around the B6 area, this little hook, and I'm close enough that I can spot that T-54E1 that's trying to cross, and then unfortunately he stops right before where I was aiming ahead of him. But we've worked some damage into him, which is really important against autoloaders because they're very dangerous late game if you let them get there, with full HP. You can see our team's still going large stretches without having the tanks in the south part of the map spotted, but again, that's because we don't have anyone who's kind of taking the leadership or initiative to spot, and then I help pick off that T-54E1. The important thing to note is that while I have this rock here to provide hard cover against those E5s, I am not in an already safe position, and I'm not going to be able to leverage vision control unless I get further away from those E5s because they have like a base 400 meter view range. So here's an example of where vision control is so important. The T-54E1 didn't spot me. I got the first shot advantage, managed to put a shot through the side of his hull, and he didn't spot me in return. I'm guessing he probably has 2 aim time or gun handling improving retrofits instead of coated optics, and You guys know I'm a big fan of coded optics. Certainly on some city maps it's not much help, but there are plenty of maps where having that first shot advantage is hugely important, not just for you, but for your allies as well. Okay, so because of the support deployment, we have lost map control. We're going to be hemmed into the northeastern side of the map. However, the score is reasonably close, so all is not yet lost here. And then I go ahead and fire on that light tank. Now, you'll notice that the Sixth Sense icon showed about the same time when I fired, which means I'd already been spotted. And that's one of those things where if you're not in hard cover or soft cover, so you're visible and you know you've been spotted, you might as well fire. Right? In that case, I was so close. But you'll see an example later where, because of intervening soft cover, I'm not spotted and I withhold my shot intentionally. Okay, so this area that I'm going up to, this is like the C0 pivot point. This is actually a very good, this C0, D0, it's a good place to cover base because I'm able to provide some overwatch. I can decide when I'm going to be exposing myself to those enemy tanks. Now, the only problem about being up here is there really isn't any meaningful protection from Artie, so I'm going to have to be careful. But I'm watching that E5, and he is tunneling hard on the 152. Notice I withhold my shot until he drives further around the corner and gives me an easy penetrating side shot. And then because I am above him, I'm shooting down, I can aim down on his turret roof. Most tanks, the top side of their armor is very thin, and now this E5 is one shot, and I get a really lucky penetrating shot there that goes through the side of his turret. But, the reason why I was able to get that shot off is because the AMX 30 has a very high rate of fire along with that excellent 390 alpha. All right, so I did get splashed there a little bit by Artie, and then I got nailed by the Jagdtiger. So unfortunately, I've lost, over half of my health, but it's time for me to get off the sniping position. You can definitely overcamp or oversnipe, and in this case, while we had lost the northwest side of the map, we've destroyed their top tier heavy platoon, and we have the opportunity to finish off this autoloader. Now, I make a mistake here. I'm going to drive too far to the right around the corner, and so while I do put a shot into the T-54 E1, I'm overexposing my tank to that Jagdtiger, and if I had been hugging tighter to the rock, there's a chance that I could have gotten slid back behind the rock before the Jagdtiger was able to hit me. And now, because I ate that shot, I'm in the unfortunate position of being one-shottable, with all these tank destroyers around here. I did try a snapshot on that LTTB, and like I said, the gun handling with this tank, it's fairly trolly, so it is what it is, but at least you've got that high alpha when it does hit, and if you miss a shot, then you get that, the high rate of fire. Now, you'll notice my platoon mate, Indignant Beaver, he did the right thing there by just moving forward and pressuring that LTTB because the LTTB was unshottable relative to his alpha. If you're in that situation, you just got to make sure you hit that shot so you don't get circled. But there was also Stritzvon, a friendly one, in the vicinity. Now, the main thing is we need to figure out where their tank destroyers are. So, we've gone from a situation of having very poor map deployment and being behind to now having a two-tank advantage, but their tanks are going to be at pretty high hit points because they've been mostly taking shots from the rear and not putting themselves at risk. Okay, so there, spot the remaining two tank destroyers, and they pushed across valley, which was the right thing for them to do. They probably should have pushed up earlier and encircled us, and I need to pick a different approach lane. I don't want to go frontally against that Tortoise or that Jagdtiger. They can out DPM me. They have meaningful armor, whereas my hull armor is butter. The one area of this tank that's reasonably well protected is the turret, but the cupola is very penable, and even the turret face can be penetrated by some of the higher penetration guns. Now, our J Panther 2 is making a really basic mistake. He's trying to push forward and be aggressive, but he's facing a higher tier TD that has both more hit points, armor, and especially more DPM, and so he's going to lose out in that exchange. You got to make sure, if you're the bottom tier tank or middle tier tank, not to get into exchanges with higher tier tanks unless they're one-shottable to you, or there's a really good tactical reason to do so. Now, in this particular case, I'm going after their Artie. You've often heard me say you don't want to go after Artie at the beginning of the game. Generally speaking, there'll be a screen of supporting enemy tanks that will shoot at you if you go after their Artie, and you'll be totally isolated. But in this case, we know where their tank destroyers are, generally where they are, and so, if I spot and find their Artie, he's not going to get any help from them. Now, the only tank that could spot me is their tortoise. Notice, like, I'm taking the long way up these switchbacks, so I'm trying to keep my white circle, that max view range circle, away from, okay, the tortoise is spotted. Now he can't even render me, right? But I just want to make sure whatever happens, I don't get spotted by the tortoise, so that, their arty can't pre-aim in my direction. Now, the right thing for our friendly teams to do in this case is just to stall the enemy out. Maybe just slightly peek, snapshot, work and damage as you can, but do so safely, because if I manage to kill their arty and come back behind them, then we can pinch them, and this game's going to be pretty easy for us to finish. So I find their arty, and I had switched over to high explosive. It's debatable whether it's worth it or not. Certainly, HE, if it penetrates, will deliver higher damage. There are those cases though where the HE will hit some spaced armor or tracks, or just get a low roll and it doesn't penetrate, and then your damage would be much lower than if you just fired AP and penned. Okay, now I don't want to be too slow about getting up here, but what I want to do is, I was thinking about coming along to approach them behind them from like the B or C lane, but what's going to happen here in a moment is, one of their 2Ds have pushed up close on our 704. Notice that their tortoise has come back across the valley and is looking for me, and even though I could stop and shoot at him, I don't, because the main thing here is not to let him know which direction I'm coming from, right? Because I need to put in about 4 or 5 shots in the tortoise to finish him off, and if I had fired at him from range, it's highly likely he would have spotted me. But this way, even if he knows he's spotted, he doesn't know the direction I'm coming from. Now, clearly, he knows where I'm coming from. Go ahead and put gun on auto aim, and this is a really bad situation for the tortoise to be in. If I were in a tank that had a more accurate gun, I might stop and try to aim for the tracks and force him to burn his repair kit. But in this case, I've got enough room to work with, and his friendly tank destroyers are not close enough to support him. Alright, so clearly there is the risk of them capping us out. Now the nice thing is, that while the cap circle itself is in the open, I should be able to approach them in a way where I'm going to be mostly hull down, and at least that way I have the option of bouncing shells in my turret armor. Folks on Reddit, I've been talking to them a lot. Some people say you should turn off chat, especially if you're getting trolled or people are picking on you because of your stats. I leave chat on always, and it's because there are times when you need to communicate something meaningful, or someone can tell you something. Like in this case, I'm asking for assistance. I'm on auto drive and I'm trying to get intel on how many hit points those enemy tanks have, so I can kind of figure out how many shots do I need to put into them. It's just helpful information. And I found in games, I'll show these later when I do a video on the AMX 13105, the tier 10 French light tank, where I believe some of the communication that I gave in chat helped us to win the battle, helped us come back. Okay, so I've spotted the RHM, and the cap time is coming down, so I go ahead and take a quick snapshot, and the RHM fires and misses, and I know he's got a much longer reload than me, so to some extent it's sometimes wise to withhold your shot, because the second you fire, especially if you've got a slow reloading gun, your opponents, if they're smart, are going to know this, they can peek out again and then get the second shot into your one shot. Now this is a matter of finding the Yag Tiger. We do have 2 minutes left, so I have a little bit of time to work with, but I don't want to be too passive because I don't want the timer to tick off. And then this Yag Tiger, I was wondering if he might, knock through those buildings and then give me a first shot advantage on his lower hull, but he's kind of sitting in the buildings, and while I could charge the buildings, if he knows that I'm coming, he might drive out from them. And again, because he had hit me earlier when I overexposed my tank firing on the T-54E1, I'm one-shottable to him, whereas I'm going to need several shots to put him down. So this becomes, the big game of Lyman's Bluff. I don't necessarily want to be too predictable in my approach lane toward him, but at the same time, I can't be too passive because, there is the risk of this game going to a draw. And, after clawing this game back, it would really feel like a loss. Okay, so there's the Yag Tiger. I probably should have waited, an extra second to get that aimed in, but I missed a shot. And then the thing is, he's far enough away that by the time I'm going to get to this corner, he's already, like, you can kind of tell when you zoom out in your 3D, you can see he's already facing in this direction. And I don't just want to come screaming around the corner, because if he hits me, that's game. We've lost. And so what I'm going to try to do is just show a sliver of my turret or that cupola, bait into a shot. There it is right there. Going to come by, aim for that track, and then get behind him, and I go ahead and turn on auto aim. So now that I've got him tracked, go ahead and just put some shots into his engine. A lot of them shooting tanks in their engine, especially the German tanks, will do one of two things. One, you can set them on fire, and two, you can do engine damage, which is great. Not just the German tanks, but just tanks in general. Shooting them in the rear is generally really helpful, and then he's not going to be able to get behind me before I can put that shell through the side of his turret. So able to claw back a pretty painful game, especially in the beginning in terms of the deployment, but it did work. Now, you know what I was saying earlier about chat? Just because you ping something or point something in chat doesn't necessarily mean that your friendly tanks are going to actually listen and do something about it. But occasionally they will. In like the case of this battle, I got my platoon mate. We're driving the 704 to kind of swing over to the western side of the map, which was helpful as opposed to kind of just being camping just facing south. Okay, so this is encounter mode for Steppes, another tier 10 battle, and a lot of Unicums favor pushing down the 9-0 line. And you'll see good examples of this why, but basically if you can win the exchange along the 9-0, not for the purposes of for the cap, but you can push all the way down the 0 lane down towards the J and K lanes, and you can do it while staying mostly underneath them. And if you're underneath the tank, you can dictate when they see you, when they don't, and when they see you, they'll typically see your turret, whereas if they're not hull down, you'll be able to see their entire tank. So it's an asymmetrical viewing relationship. That's why either getting underneath or over top of tanks is beneficial as opposed to being on the same plane. Now, one thing which is kind of disconcerting, talking about, this is another example of a poor deployment. Look at our heavies, right? So we've got a bunch of heavies that are eventually going to come east, but they're doing so in such a roundabout way. They're going to go all the way down like the A and B lines, which is going to take them a long time to get here. So it's one of those things where you want to take a fast route to get where you want to go without overexposing the side of your hull armor. But they're basically overdoing it. If they just come straight across the B lane, the lower kind of that white line between the B and C lanes, they should be fine. They should be able to get down in this ditch without taking any damage, right? Especially since we're up here and we're going to spot any of their forward spotters so that our heavies will know when they're coming. Now, our 59 Patton is pushing forward, same with his T49. And I'm coming up here not to try to cap, but to be ready to support them. And this is a risk. Now, if the enemy team had, 3, 4, 5 tanks here and they pushed us, we could definitely get killed before, because we're isolated before our heavies even get here. You can see like our mouse is bringing up the rear. He's like all the way over in the 6 lane. And I'm trying to whittle down that Lorraine already got 2 shells into him. So, he's going to be in trouble. If he takes one more shot, he's going to be in one-shot territory for us. And our T49, in my opinion, was way too aggressive, right? He's put himself into a situation where he's going to have to hope that they miss, and that someone like me is continuing to fire on his targets. In the case of the 40T, I've hit him twice. He's dumped his clip of 4 shells. He's on reload, and so we're able to finish him off. Okay, our heavies haven't quite gotten up here yet. Our E75 is going to have a pretty good game, so he's in a pretty good position. He's now exchanging shells with the tanks that are on the shelf right above me, and here's the advantage of coming up underneath him, especially with a tank that has good gun depression, right? This T-34, fully exposed, I can snapshot him, drop back below the ridge, and this particular battle doesn't have any RD, so I'm RD safe, and because I can kind of zoom out in third person, I can tell when the T-34 is looking at me and when he's not. And keep in mind, a tank like the T-34, really poor gun handling, long aim time, long reload, and then put a shot there to track him, keep him in place. And then once I'm reloaded, I can go ahead and peek up here and finish him off. Right, we're doing some work on this side, which is good because our tanks that had gone the 1-2 lane just got absolutely wrecked, right? And so because we lost the west side of the map, we're in danger of losing the northeast as well, so I can't sit back here and be too conservative. And then happened to be overexposing my tank. I was up high on that ridge hoping to take out that T-49, but a friendly tank does it, and then I drop that Scorpion. Looks like that had like 1 hit point. Okay, RE-75 he's charging, he's pressuring, which is what he should do. He's, you know, if he's a bully, he should go bully, and then finish off that 62A with a shot in the rear of his tank. But it's great whenever you can push tanks, you know, coordinated, whether that's platoon or ad hoc, share your hit points. It, you know, minimizes the risk a lot more. Like in this case, T-30's not even looking at me, able to get behind him, and we're able to finish him off. Now, remember what I said about overexposing your tank? Like this Kronwagen is overexposing his hull. He doesn't need to be so high up on the ridge, especially since he's just got amazing gun depression, right? And then, you know, to make matters worse, while he's back down there, he's giving me the side of his head, which again is an easy shot, and I'm, you know, gonna focus him as much as possible because he is an autoloader with a strong turret, so we want to get rid of that guy as quickly as possible. There is an AT-15 in the background, and I actually like underestimated just how good that reload speed is. He's already put 2 shells in me, but managed to find another connection there with the Kronwagen, and now the Kronwagen's one-shottable. You know, one thing you're going to find, which is pretty humorous, one is that our team's talking about our mouse, he's firing high explosive, which is a waste in those situations, or ineffective. The other thing is that the Luva, who's in our cap circle, ends up delivering 0 damage. So you're going to watch this battle, and we do, I'm going to like imagine my fingers in air quotes, we do win because we capped, but we didn't win because we capped, right? We basically won because I dished out massive amounts of damage and managed to stall them long enough for the cap to take out. Now this E3 is a super scary tank to face in a corridor, but out in the open like this, you know, he's got no turret, very long reload time. Obviously I'm one-shottable to him, so, you know, the goal is to just keep him thinking, right, and kind of delay him. So while we're here, he can't drive straight towards the cap. Our 416 is misplaying a little bit. 416 should be going wide and getting behind him and shooting him, because with the E3 being turretless is easy to flank. But, you know, whatever. At least if the E3 knows the 416 is there, that might give him, you know, pause for thought. And then we get this AT-15 tracked here, and then I put him down. Now this is a little bit scary. I lost track of the E3. He's not spotted, and this is the worst possible thing. He's like a TD with a big gun when you're at low hit points coming over, and so I go ahead and take a snapshot, get the track there. He repairs his track immediately, but I managed to just squeeze by, and, you know, the AMX 30 speed is fantastic. It's one of, I mean, this is a really fun tank to play. You know, really good alpha, excellent mobility, good DPM, you know, just a little bit of a flaky gun sometimes. And in this case here, this shot misses. I should have taken it off auto-aimed and aimed a little bit lower toward the middle part of his rear. Auto-aim sometimes will cause you to aim too high and you get weird bouncing shots and stuff like that. So I ended up pulling out the victory here, and again, we won by capping, but really the reason why we won is because I and the other guys who are on my area, we very much outplayed the tanks that were in front of us. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to try to be posting a few more this month. I have a lot of tanks to show you: the T-30, the AMX 13105, the Panzer IV-H, which is a blast. But let me know what tanks you're interested in seeing, and if you've got any questions or feedback about the AMX 30. Take care.